Coming up next on Arizona Horizon, we'll have our final legislative update of the year with a roundtable of reporters from the Arizona Capital Times. And the monsoon officially started over the weekend. We'll hear from an ASU climatologist on what we can expect for the upcoming storm season. Those stories next on Arizona Horizon.
Arizona Horizon is made possible by contributions from the Friends of 8, members of your Arizona PBS station. Thank you.
Good evening and welcome to Arizona Horizon. I'm Ted Simons. This year's legislative session ended early last Friday morning after hours of heated rhetoric regarding Medicaid expansion, which passed despite opposition from legislative leaders. Here to wrap things up in our final legislative update of the year are Capital Times reporters Jim Small, Luigi Del Puerto, Hank Stevenson, and Jeremy Duda. And we welcome you all to the show. We should remind our viewers that every Wednesday now during the legislative session, we teamed with the Arizona Capital Times for our weekly legislative update. That's why we got you here now, because the session's over. We won't see you again until next year. Jim, overall thoughts regarding this session?
Well, you know, every session, you always talk about how every session is different than the last, and you really, you know, you kind of have an idea of what might happen during a session, but they're all kind of unique like snowflakes. This one, you want to talk about breaking the mold. This is something that, the way this session ended, the whole, from beginning to end really, I mean, Governor Brewer coming out in her State of the State speech and talking about wanting to expand Medicaid under the auspices of the Obamacare law, to the way that this thing ended with a special session being called and both Republican leaders ending up, you know, getting steamrolled by a bipartisan coalition. I mean, this is something we've never seen before, and I think it's really left a lot of people's heads spinning.
What do you think, Luigi?
Yeah, no, I agree with Jim. I think, to me, this session really affirmed to a lot of degrees the tremendous powers that the governor has in her hands, the way she wielded those powers. I think she did it in a very smart, very strategic way. And of course, you know, she succeeded because she was able to successfully exploit the schisms within her party in the legislature, and also she had that coalition of Republicans and Democrats that rallied behind her expansion plan.
Overall impressions?
A session full of surprises. I mean, from the very first day, nobody was expecting Brewer to come out and say, we're going to expand Medicaid coverage. To the very last couple of days when she called the special session. That wasn't even in the cards as far as most people were looking at it.
What do you think, Jeremy?
I think, you know, for all the opposition the governor faced early on, I think it seemed like all along she kind of knew she could wait a lot of these people out. And, you know, we've seen that before, but I don't think we saw it end with quite the same level of bad blood or raw nerves as in the past. You know, it took a while, but eventually even the House Republicans, who had always been hesitant to roll over Andy Biggs, even by then, even they were ready to do so.
Well, I'm getting the general impression that this legislative session, the governor was the MVP.
Yeah. I mean, she definitely. I think Luigi kind of hinted at the fact that she wielded the power that she has at her disposal in a way that we haven't seen before, and I think. You know, there were a lot of cries, you know, certainly from the Republicans who ended up on the short end of this, that you know, they cried foul about this whole thing. But, you know, the reality is that the governor realized she had 16 votes on her side to pass what she wanted to pass, and that those 16 votes were committed enough that they were willing to do what many have said is, you know, in some ways commit political suicide, to go out and follow her and go against the Republican majority and upend their leadership. And she used the tools at her disposal. And she really did play it in a way that left Republican leadership with little option but to kind of roll over and say, okay, I guess this is the way it's going to be, and we'll put up a fight, but we know it's not going to matter.
How contentious was the atmosphere down there? Because, as Jim said, this is unprecedented stuff, and it got pretty testy there toward the end.
It was very contentious. Within the Republican Party, there were members that were fighting openly. There were members that were threatening each other within the same meeting, basically saying, hey, guys, you are going to get primaried, and you know you are sticking out your necks here to support the governor's expansion plan. You had grassroots Republicans basically calling out the governor. You had the chairman of the Maricopa County Republican Party equating her to Judas. I mean, it was very, very contentious. Jim's right, and what really struck me about this session is the fact that they were even willing to not just roll their leaderships in both chambers, but to replace them even. I mean, there was that plan that the governor affirmed, like after the passage of her proposal. She confirmed that plan was in the works.
And we heard words like disrespect, reckless, unbecoming the chief executive, these sorts of things. Lots of folks lobbing grenades over the governor's way. I mean, it did sound, from a distance now, from where I was sitting, it sounded like it got pretty nasty down there.
Yeah, I mean, I think during the debate on the budget package in the House, it almost came to blows between a couple of Republicans in the back room. It was a nasty, nasty fight. But one of the things that really struck me was after the final vote was done and we had sine died, everybody shook hands in the House. Everyone stuck around, said their little thank yous and everything. So it kind of makes you wonder, is this going to continue for the next session, or are they going to let bygones be bygones?
Is it going to continue for the next session?
I think so. I think more so than it would than it might have in previous years, because next year is Governor Brewer's last year there. No one really needs to kiss up. No one needs to, if you get into her disfavor, it's not going to cost you that much. She'll be gone at the end of next year. She's probably not going to have too heavy an agenda just because she's going to be a lame duck governor with one term left. So I think you are going to see a lot more of this linger on than you might have in previous years.
Well, with that in mind, let's look at the next session. Does the governor get much, if anything, that she wants? I mean, talk about and this coalition that came together of all Democrats and 9 moderate Republicans and whatever the 14 total moderate. That particular, does that last?
I think those are really kind of the million-dollar questions going forward. It's multifaceted. I mean, does time heals all wounds? But do they have enough time between now and the beginning of session to heal some of these fractures? Are people, it wasn't just the policy disagreement, it was a personal disagreement on a lot of levels. And so people are, they carry these grudges with them. And certainly against Governor Brewer, I don't see leadership going out of their way to do her any favors next year after they were basically told, look, if either you toe the line or I'm going to orchestrate a coup to kick you out. Are Andy Biggs and Andy Tobin really going to be that motivated to bend over backwards to help Governor Brewer out? I don't see a reason why they would, unless it's something that they fervently believe in as well.
Leadership will remain leadership, I take it?
I think so. I mean, it's really difficult for both chambers to change leadership in the middle of a term. And it's, the being House Speaker and being Senate President, those are not just ceremonial posts. I mean, they sign people's paychecks, for example. They assign staff. They do all sorts of things that we don't normally see because we deal with the political side of things. But I think this will spill over to the next session, and very clearly, I think the election next year will probably heal some of that wounds. We'll have to wait for what happens after the elections next year.
How galvanized are conservatives right now, not only for the next session, but now we've got this idea of an initiative out there to go ahead and chop down what was enacted? How galvanized are they?
I think they're really riled up. I mean, I think that there's a certain wing of the party that is ready to go on this. We saw that today. They just actually filed the paperwork for that referendum. It's going to be really interesting if they get the signatures for that. It can drag on and bleed into not only the next legislative session, but continue this kind of fracture up until 2014 November.
We talk about the moderate coalition here that had so much power. The coalition of conservatives, if you will. Are they there? Are they stronger, madder, angrier?
Definitely madder and angrier. And if you want to see how mad, you can come down to the Capitol on Saturday when they're having this kickoff rally for the referendum. The organizers, which include a couple of Brewer's old nemesis from the legislature, Frank Ancinori and Ron Gould, they're organizing. There's going to be a lot of legislators there, probably a lot of the same conservative legislators you heard denouncing the governor and her allies on the floor. There's going to be a lot of precinct committeemen. I mean, the grassroots base of the party. These people are extraordinarily mad. They feel like they've been betrayed. And, they've got, I think, more than 1,200 volunteers right now ready to pass out these petitions.
And one of the things I keep hearing is that this was, in the minds of many, a Democratic budget. Is that valid?
No, I don't really think so. I mean, this is really not that much different than the budget that Andy Biggs introduced to begin with in the Senate, and it's really not that much different than the budget that Governor Brewer introduced back in January that she unrolled. Yes, it does increase state spending by about around $300 million or so over the previous year's budget. It does increase spending over what the baseline is, over just the mandatory minimum spending. But to call it a Democratic budget, I think is more political rhetoric,
Yeah.
I think, than anything, and I think it speaks more to maybe the tactics that were used and the people who voted for it, less than maybe the actual content of the budget.
Talk about education, CPS, social services, these kinds of things. How were they addressed in the budget? And again, were these the kinds of things that the majority, obviously, they voted for it? Is that what they wanted, though?
You know, the governor pretty much got what she wanted in this budget as well, not just on the Medicaid side of things. I mean, she was asking for more money for CPS, for example. She got that one. The Democrats were asking for some money for education. They got that one as well. But those are priorities by the governor also. And even if when you really think about it, even CPS funding is something that the conservatives in the Senate agree with. If you recall, at the beginning of this session, they did pass emergency funding to hire more workers in CPS, and everybody agreed with that. So Jim's right. This budget is not wholly different than what the governor proposed, and not wholly different than what the Senate President and the Speaker proposed.
As far as other aspects of the session, now we had the governor signing election law changes. First of all, was that a surprise that she signed that?
I think it might have been a surprise to a couple of Democrats out there who thought that she had their back on this. There may or may not have been promises made that this wouldn't become law. But as far as the provisions in the bill, no. This is all things that the governor would agree with if you look at her past history.
And again, this is you can't return someone else's ballot if you're part of a political organization, and removing early voters from the early voting list if you don't vote early, these kinds of things. Surprise to you that she signed it?
Not really. Remember that Brewer was Secretary of State for 6 years, and a lot of people, election officials, especially Republicans, have been concerned about a lot of this stuff for a long time. I mean, there were the rumors of, maybe a promise to the Democrats, but it doesn't seem like that was the case. And for the most part, these are, standard conservative issues. On most issues, Medicaid aside, she's a, pretty standard, solid conservative on most issues. And I think most of the stuff would appeal to her, both as a Republican and as the former top elections official in the state.
The high-profile issues, guns, abortion, what happened?
Not much.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that there was the one gun law that went through was closing a loophole in a law that was passed a couple of years ago regarding gun buyback programs and destruction of firearms that are purchased at those. But beyond that, I mean, there really wasn't a whole lot. I mean, there was a late push for some abortion legislation that was kind of a melange of things that included inspections of abortion clinics unannounced, and also had some some language designed to keep the access money, the Medicaid money, away from providers like Planned Parenthood. But that ended up, on the final day, it was clear that the votes weren't there, and that bipartisan coalition was banding together on that issue as well to stop that from going forward.
Stop that from going forward, but will we see those things revive next session?
It's very likely. And this is something clearly the Center for Arizona Policy, the evangelical Christian organization that lobbied for it, introduced it, and wanted to get it out, get it done, get it passed in this session. It's very likely we will see the same bill next year. What's interesting is they promised this year that they will not be pushing for more abortion bills. They will be essentially playing defense. They've gotten pretty much everything they wanted in the last 3-4 years or so. But then there was this late push to have these unannounced inspections, and I think that meshed with what some of the pro-life lawmakers were wanting, which is a defeat of Medicaid expansion, by using this pro-life issue as a wedge.
And we should mention sales tax reform. That got passed as well, with some changes and some compromises there toward the end regarding where supplies and things are purchased. We've got a few minutes left here. Let's go around the table. The biggest surprise and maybe the most memorable moment for you this session, covering the legislature?
I think the biggest surprise was definitely the special session, and probably the most memorable moment goes right along with that. As I walked into the House, before the special session had been officially announced, and it was totally empty on the floor except for 8 Republican lawmakers who were all suspected of supporting Medicaid expansion. It was just them sitting in this big empty room. That was quite a vision right there.
Kind of surreal. Most memorable moment here, biggest surprise, what do you got?
Most memorable moment, probably from the exact same night, just shortly afterwards, watching all of the House Republicans who opposed Medicaid expansion sitting up in the balcony in protest, leaving just one of their members, Adam Quasman, down to kind of hold down the fort for all of them and denounce the governor and Medicaid expansion and the whole coalition on their behalf.
What do you think, Jim?
I think the most memorable thing to take away from the session was the way in which Governor Brewer got what she wanted. You know, there's been arguments made that this wasn't wholly necessary to do, but it certainly flexes muscles, I think, that we haven't seen governors flex before, and it really changes the dynamic between the executive and the legislative heading into the governor's lame duck year, which historically has always been kind of a year where governors propose a lot of things and they can't get anything done.
Yeah.
So we'll see what kind of an impact that had. This may have a good impact on that, or it may have a bad impact on that.
We had brazen bullying, National Review, conduct unbecoming a chief executive, Carl Seal saying her legacy will be the most effective Democratic governor in Arizona history. I mean, does that stuff all pile up, huh?
Yeah, it does, you know, and the governor was clearly immensely frustrated with the way things were going and the way that her priorities were being addressed by the legislature. And, you know, she said, fine, the Constitution allows me this power. I'm going to use it to get what I want right now instead of having to wait for you guys to dither and eventually get around to what you say you're going to do.
Biggest surprise, most memorable moment. What do you got?
This special session was the biggest surprise. I mean, it just happened out of the blue. It came out of left field. Almost fell off our chair when we saw that press release from the governor's office flying in at 5 p.m. Basically saying, yep, right now I'm calling this special session. Most memorable moment for me was when Senate President Andy Biggs told me and Ben Giles, another of our reporter, that he was going to do everything he can to block Medicaid expansion from getting to the floor, because at that moment that became the beginning of the end, if you will. That started the ball rolling. The Senate President broke the deadlock, the stalemate over Medicaid expansion by doing that. He essentially facilitated the way for this to happen, for allies of the governor to force through this policy debate.
Well, gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us tonight, and thank you again for the entire legislative session. Great updates, and we look forward to seeing you again in 2014. Oh, my goodness. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Get the inside scoop on what's happening at Arizona PBS. Become an 8 Insider. You'll receive weekly updates on the most anticipated upcoming programs and events. Get the 8 Insider delivered to your email inbox. Visit azpbs.org to sign up today.
Arizona's monsoon officially started on June 15th, and though we haven't seen dust storms, microbursts, or many buildups over the mountains as yet, we should be seeing them soon. ASU climatologist Randy Cerveny is here to discuss the vagaries of the monsoon. Good to see you again.
Hello.
You know, we have you every year. We come in here and I ask the same dumb questions, but we're going to try to vary it around a little bit here. Again, why do we start this on June 15th before the storms even start?
Well, we realigned that. It used to be, the old timers will remember, that we worried about the dew point. We said that you had to have 3 days of the dew point being 55 degrees. That tells us, the amount of water in the air tells us whether we have the energy to create a thunderstorm. And 55 was kind of a critical number to get a good thunderstorm going. But we realized that it's a little bit more like the hurricane season. Well, the hurricane season starts on June 1st. Even though we're not going to have a hurricane usually on June 1st, we want to get people prepared. So the idea was, if we start the monsoon season preparations on June 15th, we can get the word out to everybody so that they know what to do when these thunderstorms actually roll into town.
When do the storms usually start?
For Phoenix, it's usually around July 7th is when we get the first thunderstorms. Now, of course, the problem is that the first thunderstorms are not going to be moisture producers. They're going to be dust storms. They're going to have a lot of lightning with them, a lot of wind, very little rain.
Do they always have to? Does it always have to be that way? Why can't we start with a big old gully washer?
Well, it could, but it's very unlikely, because the idea is these thunderstorms, when they produce rain, and even up in the higher parts in the early part of the season, they will be producing rain. It just evaporates before it gets down to the ground. The ground and the air near the ground is so dry that it sucks up that moisture before it actually can get down to the ground.
Where do these storms come from? Monsoon storms.
Monsoon thunderstorms are the result of moisture surges that come from the Pacific Ocean and the Gulf of California. That moisture surges up through Arizona, and then as it's being lifted, because the elevation here in Phoenix and in Tucson and in places in Arizona is higher than the Gulf of California, it gets lifted up and we produce thunderstorms.
Is that why areas like Yuma and along the Colorado River, they don't seem to get much monsoon, while areas further to the east do?
Exactly, the uplift there. Now, Yuma is actually one of the first places that we look to see the start of the monsoon, because we can see that moisture surging up the Colorado River. But they don't get a lot of thunderstorms.
Okay, it seems like you usually need a few 110 plus, maybe 115, 16, 17. It always seems like you got to go crazy hot before you get these storms coming in. Is there a correlation?
Yeah, there is. And actually, we're coming up to our illustrious anniversary of the 122 degree temperature here. But we do, because the heat of the desert acts like a vacuum cleaner. When we get really hot air rises, and so it literally sucks up the air from the Gulf of California and draws it into Mexico, or draws it into Arizona. If we didn't have that heat, there would be nothing to really push that moisture up into Arizona.
Is that one of the reasons why after we have a really big monsoon storm, the next day it's unlikely to get a repeat?
That's one of the reasons. It stabilizes out the atmosphere.
Dust storms. Where do these dust storms, can you stand there and say, a dust storm started right there? I mean, where do these things come from? They have to start somewhere.
Well, they do, and they start from thunderstorms. Usually it's thunderstorms that are quite distant from the valley, that are infamous July 5th of 2011 dust storm that everybody remembers, actually started down in Tucson. There was very severe thunderstorms that hit the city of Tucson, and then as those thunderstorms died out, they put out a gust of air. That gust of air worked its way northward, across Eloy, into Casa Grande, and then northward. As it did, it was picking up dust. And then we got the end result, which was the massive dust storm.
So somewhere north of Tucson, you could basically say, it started here.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
As far as monsoon rain is concerned, what areas of the state get the most? What areas of the state get the least?
The areas that get the most are generally the upland areas, because again, the key is that you get that moisture being pushed up into the atmosphere. So the Mogollon Rim gets a lot. Tucson actually gets a lot. Parts of the valley get a lot of rain during our monsoon.
Which parts?
Places like Cave Creek. The airport is actually one of the driest areas, because in the entire metropolitan area, Sky Harbor Airport is at the lowest elevation, so there's no uplift in that you don't get as strong a thunderstorm.
And that's why Tucson seems to get more storms, because it's a higher elevation and closer to where the moisture is coming from?
And it's butting up right against those mountains, so that air doesn't have to travel very far to be uplifted quite dramatically.
I remember years ago hearing that Tucson had more lightning strikes than almost any other city in the country. Is that true?
During certain times of the year. I mean,
yes.
as a yearly total, Florida gets more. But
yes.
During the monsoon, we actually do. And it's one reason why some of the world famous lightning photographers, Warren Fadley, lives down in Tucson, because the lightning here is so vivid, so impressive, that it's some of the best in the world.
Are there areas of the state that get more lightning strikes than others?
Actually, there are, and some of it actually has to do with the result of military. We found out, for example, that in Yuma, there's sometimes less lightning strikes because of the amount of chafing that goes on when they're testing fighter pilots' planes to obstruct radar. They will dump out chaff.
Yeah.
And as that chaff goes through the atmosphere, it stabilizes out the electrical current. You don't get as much lightning.
Well, that's interesting. And the higher elevations, I would imagine, would get more lightning strikes just because you're just closer to the clouds? Or
yes, because lightning tends to hit the taller objects. So high trees and high elevations, definitely.
Microbursts notorious here in Arizona, in the valley especially. I mean, they just one area, I think we understand, downdraft, boom, lightning poles down, everything. Why don't we see more tornadoes with our monsoon storms?
The key to get a tornado is that you have to have, in essence, rotation. And in, say, the Midwest in the Midwest and the Great Plains areas, the rotation is from the result of having a jet stream, a river of very fast-moving air up at 30,000 feet above the storms. so that it can literally suck up the air from the ground and start it to spin. Well, the jet stream at this time of year is all the way up in Canada for us. And so we don't get that rotation. We'll have the uplift, we'll have the air rising to create the thunderstorms, but we don't have anything to really start to spin.
Last question. I'm not going to ask you for a prediction on the monsoon because every climatologist says you can't predict. Why can't you predict what's going to happen here? Why can't you have an indication of what's going to go on in the next few months?
Because the conditions to create a thunderstorm are the kind that we get here, we call them convective thunderstorms, are very localized. They depend very much on what the temperature of one small area is compared to another area. So that places like the West Valley versus the East Valley, some years we're going to get more storms out in the West Valley, some in the East. It's very, very difficult.
Very difficult, tricky stuff. Well, Randy, thank you for joining us and happy monsoon.
And the same.
And that is it for now. I'm Ted Simons. Thank you so much for joining us. You have a great evening.
Arizona Horizon is made possible by contributions from the Friends of Eight, members of your Arizona PBS station. Thank you.